Hey there, fantasy owners. Welcome to Lift the Cup Fantasy, or LTC Fantasy as some call it. And we're continue rolling along with our 21-22 team reviews. Today we're going to look at the Edmonton Oilers. We'll take a look at who led them in different stats for goalies, defensemen, and forwards. Who is their biggest fantasy disappointment? Who is their biggest fantasy surprise? And who on their roster was relevant fantasy-wise on a weekly basis? We'll continue to have these come out every few days because no better way to spend the fantasy offseason than watching some playoff hockey and talking a little bit of fantasy hockey. Don't forget to subscribe. That way you can catch your favorite teams review, maybe your rivals review, maybe you want to catch all 32, or catch a team that sometimes you overlook fantasy-wise. We'll get right into it. And goaltending stats. Games played was led by Mikko Koskinen. He played 45 for him. He also led him in wins at 27. Stuart Skinner had the best goals against average at 2.62. He did only play 13 games, but it was kind of committee with Smith being hurt. And Mike Smith led him in save percentage at 915. Goaltending in Edmonton is definitely a question mark going into the season. Definitely looked rough for about 2/3 of the season there. You weren't sure what you were going to get. After Smith's second stint with an injury there, he kind of took the reins and is rolling with them well into the playoffs now. Defenseman stats. Who led him in goals? It was Evan Bouchard at 12. Tyson Barrie led him in assists at 34. And Evan Bouchard led him in points at 43. Plus minus was Darnell Nurse at plus 18. Nurse also led him in hits at 196 and blocks at 132. Evan Bouchard led him in shots on goal, no surprise. As you see a trend with these reviews, whoever scored the most goals tends to lead him in shots. He had 205 shots. Bouchard really emerged this year in his first full season. Kind of took playing time away from Barrie, so to speak. Nurse also had a fairly decent fantasy season. So did Barrie, just not as good as the previous year with Bouchard emerging there. Forward stats, no surprise with their big two guns. You're going to see them a lot in this little clip. Leon Draisaitl led him in goals at 55. Connor McDavid led him in assists at 79, also led him in points at 123. Connor McDavid, he was a plus 28 this year. Zach Kassian led him in hits. He had 154. Derek Ryan, he was kind of in and out of the lineup a little bit. He led him in blocks at 38. And Connor McDavid led him in shots on goal at 314. Definitely took a lot of shots there. Obviously, McDavid and Draisaitl, they were electric all season long. You can't say enough about them. Good thing Edmonton has them both. Kane had a really good season after he did sign with them. He played in 43 games, put up pretty good point totals there. Overall, the forward group in Edmonton was fairly good all season. They racked up a lot of points. Biggest fantasy surprise for me from Edmonton has to be Evan Bouchard. It was his first full season in the league. You knew there was talent there, but he really got better as the season went along. Took playing time away from Barrie. Sometimes he was on the first power play and Barrie was knocked down, etc. And he had a really good fantasy season. Definitely more than what I expected. I expected some from him, but not as well as he did. Biggest fantasy disappointment has to be the one that lost some ice time to Bouchard and Tyson Barrie. He had 41 points in 73 games played this year, so not bad, but you're expecting more considering you put up 48 points in 55 games a year ago. He kind of cemented himself on that power play unit, which was really good again this year, but he just didn't quite have the point totals, and you really wanted some more from him. Who is fantasy relevant on a weekly basis? Couple of guys you might have heard of. Draisaitl and McDavid obviously were in there. Kane, once he signed. Nugent Hopkins had a really good season. Darnell Nurse is another one. And I would put Evan Bouchard up there because he really turned it on, and I really see him being fantasy relevant next year. Streamers for them this year, there were some really good options there. And Zach Hyman, Jesse Puljujarvi at times, if he was up on the top line. Kyler Yamamoto, he had some stretches there where he's really hot with Draisaitl. Barry, I would move him down to streamer status now as his role is diminishing. Other than that, there's a lot of good fantasy options streamer-wise and weekly basis-wise in Edmonton. I really do hope you did enjoy the episode. If you did, remember to hit like, hit subscribe, and remember that notification bell. We'll be out in a couple of days with another one. Enjoy the fantasy off-season, fantasy owners.